Emily moved through the school hallway like a shadow, unnoticed by most, invisible to the rest. Her eyes, a quiet ocean of stories untold, stayed downcast as she walked, a notebook clutched tightly to her chest. The sounds around her, the buzz of laughter, the sharp clack of locker doors, the rising wave of chatter barely touched her. She had learned to block them out, learned that silence was a shield, and invisibility, a form of survival. Asterisk whispers trailed her like cigarette smoke. Weirdo, mute, creepy girl. The same labels every day, stitched to her back by voices that never bothered to know her. She didn't flinch, she didn't turn. Her steps remained slow and deliberate, like someone tiptoeing across thin ice. Her silence wasn't born from fear. It was forged from something much deeper. Asterisk, every day after school, Emily took the city bus alone, riding past the bustle of coffee shops, schools, and playgrounds until she reached the hospital. There, in room 418, her younger brother Jake waited, paralyzed from the chest down after a car accident 2 years ago. Jake couldn't move, but his mind was sharp and his heart even sharper. Emily would sit by his bed, open her notebook, and read stories she had written just for him. Some were full of magic, some of mystery, but all were built with hope. She'd hold his hand, run her fingers gently through his hair, and talk to him about the world outside. And though her voice was soft, it was the only thing that made him smile. Asterisk back at school, no one saw that version of her. They only saw the girl who sat alone at lunch, who didn't raise her hand in class, who never joined the school events. A girl who kept to herself. And for teenagers hungry for a target, her quietness made her the perfect prey. Asterisk Emily's locker was near the boys' bathroom, a prime spot for trouble. The Bullies' 3 boys led by Carter had made her their daily entertainment. It was never brutal, just cruel enough to cut, knocking her books down, mocking her clothes, whispering insults just loud enough to be heard. Emily took it all in silence, not because she didn't feel pain but because she had promised herself that she'd never show it. She had a brother who couldn't fight back. She could endure a little cruelty, but even the strongest walls can crack. On one particularly grey morning, Emily was walking down the hallway when Carter and his gang blocked her path. "Hey freak," he sneered. She stepped aside, hoping to pass without incident, but Carter wasn't in the mood to let her go. With a smirk and no warning, he slapped her across the face hard enough that it echoed. Her books hit the floor. The hallway, for once, fell silent. Asterisk phones were raised, eyes widened. A line had been crossed, but no one moved. Asterisk Emily didn't cry, she didn't run. Instead, she slowly bent down, picked up her notebook, and stood up with a calmness that unnerved even Carter. Then, without a word, she grabbed his wrist with a force that belied her gentle frame. In a flash, she twisted his arm backward and snapped his elbow. Asterisk Carter dropped to the floor, screaming. His friends backed away in disbelief. Emily stood over him, breathing steady, eyes unblinking. She wasn't angry, she wasn't wild, she was simply done. Asterisk by the time a teacher arrived, the crowd had parted. Emily didn't resist when they asked her to come to the office. She simply walked, silent as ever, but now every step echoed with something near respect, maybe even awe. Asterisk what they didn't know, what no one had ever bothered to ask, was that Emily had trained in martial arts for years. Her father, before he passed, taught her discipline, control, and how to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She never used it. Not until today, not until it was needed. Asterisk in the principal's office, the truth came out. A student who had filmed the incident stepped forward. The video showed everything: the bullying, the slap, and Emily's restrained but swift response. For once, the adults saw the full picture. And for once, justice didn't come with a detention slip, but with understanding. Asterisk Emily returned to school a week later. She still walked the halls in silence, still held her notebook close, but something had changed. The whispers had stopped. The stares were different. She wasn't invisible anymore. Asterisk, and as for Carter, his arm would heal. But what stuck with him most wasn't the pain. It was the note Emily left in his locker days later. "I'm not what you thought. Most people aren't." Asterisk sometimes. Strength speaks loudest through silence. Asterisk it was just after the lunch bell when Emily stepped into the corridor, her eyes fixed on the floor like always. The hallway buzzed with students pouring out of classrooms, lockers slamming, voices shouting over one another. Emily moved quietly along the lockers, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. She didn't need trouble, she only wanted to get to the library, to the small corner desk where she could disappear until the next class. Asterisk. But trouble found her. Asterisk 3 boys blocked the hallway ahead, leaning casually against the lockers, like They owned the space. Carter, the ringleader, straightened when he saw her. His smile wasn't friendly, it never was. Behind him were Ryan and Malik, his shadows, laughing before a word was even spoken. Well, look who it is, Carter said, stepping in front of her. The ghost girl. Did you finally decide to speak today? Emily didn't answer. She turned slightly to the side, trying to slip past. Carter's hand shot out and poked her shoulder. Hey, I asked you something. Still. She said nothing. Her steps didn't quicken, she simply moved as if the confrontation didn't exist. And that was when it happened. With no warning, no hesitation. Carter slapped her across the face. The crack was sharp and cruel, louder than anything in that hallway. Emily staggered slightly, her book spilling to the floor with a soft thud. A hush fell over the crowd of students. Laughter turned into gasps. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones came out always fast when there's violence. Fingers began recording, capturing the moment, but still, no one stepped forward. No teacher in sight, no friends to shield her. Emily stood motionless for a moment, one hand on her cheek. Her face burned, not from pain, but from the sudden raw humiliation. She bent down slowly, reaching for her fallen notebook, but something inside her shifted. Her fingers curled tightly around the spine of the book. The trembling that usually lived in her hands stilled. Her eyes, for once, didn't avoid the world. They locked on Carter, steady, cold. No words came from her lips. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. Her silence, so often mistaken for weakness, became something else entirely. A storm waiting to break. And as she straightened to her full height, something in the air changed. Those watching didn't know what was about to happen, but they could feel it. Something was coming. The quiet girl wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Time seemed to freeze. Emily stood tall now, her notebook in one hand, her other clenched at her side. Carter, still smirking like this was a joke, reached out to shove her again, maybe a push to the shoulder, maybe worse. But he never got the chance. In one swift, fluid motion, Emily's hand shot up. She grabbed his wrist, pivoted her body, and twisted. The move was clean, fast, and shockingly precise, too quick for anyone to react. A sickening snap echoed through the hallway, followed by Carter's agonized scream as he dropped to the floor, clutching his elbow. The corridor erupted with cheers or gasps, but stunned silence. Mouths hung open, the phones, still raised, stopped shaking. Even his two friends stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure if they should help or just watch like everyone else. But the real focus wasn't on Carter, writhing on the ground. It was on her. Emily stood over him, her chest rising and falling in a slow, controlled rhythm. Her face was unreadable, not angry, not scared, just calm. Her eyes weren't glazed with fury, they were crystal clear, aware, fully present. She hadn't lashed out. She hadn't acted on rage. She had defended herself. Nothing more. The quiet girl, the one they called creepy, mute, invisible, had turned the power back in a single, deliberate moment. Then came the shouting. A teacher burst onto the scene, eyes scanning the crowd, immediately rushing toward Carter. What happened here? She demanded. Dozens of eyes shifted, voices unsure. A few murmurs started. He hit her. She broke his arm. No, she didn't do anything until the before the confusion could grow. Someone stepped forward. It was a boy from the photography club, Nathan. He held up his phone. I recorded the whole thing, he said clearly. She didn't do anything until he slapped her. She was just trying to walk away. The teacher hesitated, then took the phone. Her face slowly changed as she watched the video, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally, understanding. Students began whispering again, but this time, it was different. No laughter, no mocking, just shock and the rising tide of respect for the girl who had always walked alone. Emily said nothing through it all. She didn't cry, she didn't explain, she just stood still, notebook still in hand, the same one she used to write stories for her brother, the same hand that had just snapped the chain that held her in silence. Justice, for once, hadn't arrived late, it had arrived in her own quiet strength. The principal's office felt colder than it looked. Emily sat alone on the edge of the worn leather chair, her notebook resting quietly on her lap. Her face, still bearing a faint red mark from the slap, was blank, but not from fear. It was the stillness of someone holding back a storm of emotions. Across from her, the principal stared with furrowed brows, hands folded tightly, unsure whether to question, to comfort, or to wait. A tense silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Then came a soft knock. The door creaked open, and a student entered hesitantly. Nathan, the same boy who had recorded the hallway incident. He held his phone in his hand, eyes glancing nervously at Emily before facing the principal. I have the video, he said quietly. You should see it. The principal nodded, motioning him forward. Nathan handed over the phone, and the room fell silent again, save for the faint audio of the recording. The slap echoed in the tiny speaker. Then, the image of Emily calm, humiliated, and finally resolute, snapping Carter's elbow in one clean move. It was impossible to misinterpret. When the video ended, the principal exhaled slowly, her posture softening. Thank you, Nathan. You can wait outside. He gave Emily one more glance, one filled with something like admiration, then left, closing the door gently behind him. The principal turned to Emily. Why didn't you say anything before? Emily didn't look up at first. Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook, her breathing shallow. Then, she spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I go to the hospital every day after school. My little brother Jake, he's in a wheelchair, paralyzed. 2 years ago he stepped in to stop a bully from beating up another kid. He got thrown into a brick wall. Her voice wavered but didn't break. I read to him every day. I promised him I'd be brave, but I promised myself I'd never let another bully hurt someone just because they thought they could. The principal sat back, eyes misting with a deep, wordless empathy. For a long moment, she said nothing. No judgments, just quiet understanding. The silence was shattered again by another knock, this time louder, firmer. The door opened, and Carter's parents walked in, faces twisted with outrage. His mother's voice was the first to cut through the air. I want that girl expelled. My son's arm is broken. But the principal raised her hand calmly. We've seen the full video, she said. Carter assaulted her without provocation. She acted in self-defense. She didn't escalate, he did. But his father started but stopped when he saw Emily's face. Not angry, not triumphant, just tired, worn, human. And in that moment, even Carter's parents couldn't argue with the truth sitting in front of them. Because the truth wasn't just in the video. It was in the red mark on her cheek, in the silence she had carried for years, in the cracked voice of a sister who knew what pain looked like and what it meant to fight for peace. The room grew still again, not out of fear, but respect. The truth had spoken, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt seen. 1 week later, the library was unusually quiet even for a space meant for silence. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting soft gold patterns across the tables. In a far corner, tucked behind a stack of poetry books, Emily sat with her usual notebook open and a worn paperback in her hand. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, steady, focused, but peaceful now, not guarded. Beside her sat Nathan, the student who had stepped up when no one else did. He wasn't reading. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. For Emily, it meant the world. No cameras, no attentions, just quiet solidarity. A teacher walked past their table, pausing just for a second. She didn't say a word, only nodded at Emily with a warmth that didn't need explanation. Emily returned it with the faintest smile, small but real. The school hallway, once a gauntlet of whispers and cruel glances, had changed. Now, when Emily walked through, students moved aside respectfully. Eyes followed her. Yes, but not with ridicule, with wonder, with thought, with the weight of knowing they had misjudged someone extraordinary. And then came Carter. He had returned to school 2 days earlier. His arm in a black sling, he walked slower now, not because of the pain, but because something in him had quieted too. He didn't look anyone in the eye, especially not Emily, but today was different. Emily opened her locker after lunch and found a folded piece of paper tucked inside. No name, just handwriting, neat, unfamiliar. She opened it. I'm sorry. I never saw you, I do now. She stood still for a moment, reading it twice. 3 times. Her fingers didn't crumple it. She just folded it back gently and placed it inside her notebook. There was no need to respond. Because change doesn't always come with applause or headlines. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, like a whisper that grows stronger with each act of kindness, each moment of courage. And so, the students whispered a new name for her now, not weirdo, not mute. They called her the girl with quiet strength. And in that library corner where stories lived and healing had finally begun, Emily turned the page both in her book and in her life, ready to write a new chapter.